he's saying. Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about espresso body. And by body, we don't mean how it affects your body, but rather the body of the espresso itself, the thickness, the mouth feel. And it's a complicated thing because it isn't just how much stuff is in there making it thick. It's also crema and a viscosity and something else we don't really know.
A little bit of je ne sais quoi sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
People try to measure body and they find that it doesn't really translate directly. Like it would think a higher TDS, more stuff in the water would give you more body, and it does, but that isn't the whole story. So when we talk about body, we're actually talking about a subjective taste on the tongue, like it just feels thick. And the reason we're talking about body now is that in the original review by John Weiss of the Decent Espresso Machine, he mostly liked everything about it, except he felt that it wasn't very good at producing shots with a lot of body. It was much better at clear shots. And the general thinking being that clarity goes in this direction, body in this direction, and they're enemies, that you basically can't have body and clarity, and you can't have clarity and body. But this machine can do all sorts of things, all sorts of different flow rates and temperatures, and shouldn't we be able to do body? Shouldn't we be able to emulate body? And so in the past 7 years, I'd say this has been the single biggest fixation among Decent Espresso owners, is how do we get more body out of our espresso? And I would say it's specifically medium to dark roast people.
Yeah, I would say so. And this was very in line with what I was trying to trial out. Like, could we get light roast with body? You know,
And did it taste good?
Yeah, that was what came into question, and it's what John's referring to in that they're antagonizing sort of characteristics, where if you want the body and you've got a light roast, well, you can get the body, but you might not necessarily get the flavor characteristics that you're looking for. While the flavor's in there, you just can't differentiate unless you start diluting, and then you're diluting the body, which is not the goal that we want to achieve. And in trialing out a few light roasts, naturally going to medium and then medium dark, you find a lot more success with the darker roasts. But that's not to say you can use certain techniques to help you there, especially with medium light roasts. But I would say you're either one camp or the other. Sometimes you might be in the middle depending on your drink style, but usually you're more clarity or more body.
We did find with one of those geishas from Colt Road that it was a silky body. I wouldn't call it a thick body, but there was a little bit on the tongue that was actually really surprising. So in that journey to try and increase the body in the espresso, a few things have been discovered. So first is that the speed of pre-infusion directly affects the body. Namely, when I had programmed all the original profiles in the Decent, I went with a slower pre-infusion of 4 milliliters per second. And the reason I did that is that it meant that I had less channeling. The puck wasn't hammered at the start with a lot of water, which was my experience with a traditional machine before the Decent. And a lot of my shots would end up terrible with that approach. Going to a 4 milliliters per second flow rate was about the flow rate that a puck could absorb of water, and it meant that gentle wetting meant a lot less channeling, and I also got much clearer shots. So that was the way that we went with that. What got discovered is if you amped up the flow rate, and initially the Decent was only limited to 6 mils per second initial flow rate, or 6 mils per second total flow rate. Through a firmware update, we upped that to 8, and you can creep up to like 8.8 mils per second, sometimes 9, and that really has a big impact on body. So slamming that puck hard seems to, I guess, make a puck that's denser. We don't really know exactly why. The espresso comes out sooner as well, but it's definitely thicker. So that was number one. And then number two, which turned out to be massive, was the headspace over the puck. And what I'm talking about here is I've got a portafilter with coffee in it, and I'm talking about when you lock it into your espresso machine, you've got what's called a shower screen. It's like a mesh, and it pushes down the puck, or there's a little bit of gap above it. If you have a gap, the puck is able to swell when it pre-infuses, and that swelling is a blooming or an even wetting, and it is really conducive to greater clarity and more even wetting and less channeling. And it's not just me. Socratic did those tests as well, and they found the same thing on a La Marzocco machine, was a greater headspace was better for light roasts. However, it turns out that really clamping down on that really increases the body. And we think that's because when you put a shower screen on the espresso coffee puck and you give it water, that puck wants to swell and then it can't. And so it basically mashes across all sides, and it fills any gaps. It becomes very homogeneous. It tends to channel less because you're just squeezing it, and then your shots are dramatically thicker. So I would say that was the biggest thing, and we didn't initially change the decent because people like Swarks and some others offered kits for the decent that you could buy, and they would put spacers in there, and you could choose just how extreme you wanted to decrease that. And if you went really extreme, you got super thick espressos, but at a loss of clarity.
Yeah.
And I think you've played with the spacer kit.
Yeah, I have touched upon it a little bit, and it's really good if you find a coffee that works like really well with it without having to play around with your dose. And it's quite convenient for you if you are sticking to a very benchmark recipe, and that's what I really like about it. But you know, you have to be mindful when you're switching roasts and how that will affect that particular roast, and you know, some minute adjustments according to your dose will be needed. So while it is more convenient and you have a slightly more flexibility, you just have to be a lot more mindful on that particular variable. So yeah.
Something to keep in mind with that headspace is that it's much harder to have less headspace than more. So if you don't have much headspace but you want more, you just switch to a larger basket. You go from 15-gram basket to 18-gram basket with the same amount of coffee, and you'll just have headspace. And with that in mind, we have been gradually lowering our headspace. From 1.0 to 1.1 was the biggest change, where it was several millimeters that we reduced. And now in the latest version that's coming out, 1.4.4, we're now following the E61 standard, and we've dropped even a little bit more space off these. And again, that's because we're finding that if you want that body, then you can get that with reduced headspace. And if you want more clarity, you just use a larger basket. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But wait, there's more. Lever machines really make very thick, syrupy espressos, and they're kind of amazing. And we thought maybe one reason is that lever machines almost universally have much smaller baskets. This is a 58 millimeter basket. 54 from Della Corte is one of the common sizes, 53 going down to as little as 44. I think I've seen a 41 basket. And the smaller the basket, the thicker the coffee puck. And you get a lot more body. I mean, just insanely more body. So I sent Paul on an adventure to source all the baskets we could find that had shapes that started wide and ended narrow. And you can see these are different end sizes. And here's another one as well. And we're only showing you the ones that were the end result, because what Paul did is a whole matrix doing testing and tasting to try and see where he could get more body but not sacrifice clarity and flavor. So at this point, that's the introduction over. I turn it over to Paul, who's done all this research. And just so you know, I have never had any of these espressos from these baskets. This is going to be a truly blind taste testing where Paul has these three baskets that he's recommending we add to the decent line, and we'll see what I think.
All right. So I think it's what an introduction, and I have to say I had tens of different baskets, and to be honest, a lot of them didn't produce very good results, but the ones that we chosen here, I felt that adds to your workflow in that, you know, you don't have to be as mindful over your prep. They're easy to work with, and they seem to be very flexible, especially the 14 grams one, which you can interchange with milk and also drink black. So that was a really cool thing I discovered. But as I'm discussing, let's pull a 15-gram shot, just as a comparison.
Yeah, I was kind of floored, and I want to see if this is actually the case, is Some of the light roasts, Paul was claiming less channeling and just as good flavor, which doesn't sound like it should. Is it that? Like it's free. It's wonderful.
Yes,
is that going to happen?
Now, the reason why I mentioned this to you privately, and I said I was stuck in the middle a little bit, and I was kind of like trying to find inspiration on how to get a good shot, and this is when I looked into history and basically looked into more the Italian style, their doses, and what was the recipe back in the day, and can I sort of get close to that but on the DU1. So what that naturally did was it made me use a lot lower ratios than we're used to. So, you know, in the factory, we're used to extracting 1:2 ratios, maybe even 1:3, maybe even a Raulange extraction at 5:1 if it's a really nice light roast. But when it comes to a 1:1 or maybe a normal at 1:1.5, those type of shots are rarely done here because we just feel like we're wasting coffee. But that's not to say that that sort of style has its uses. I found that during these experiments with these smaller diameter at the bottom baskets at, I believe it's at 53, but the whole area size is slightly smaller than that. I found much more success at the lower ratios. And what I found was that the lower ratios just let that clarity pop out a little bit more, but still have that aftertaste in sort of the body that it produces. And hopefully we'll be able to repeat some of these shots with you today. I did just dial them in. And I don't think John's used to me actually pulling shots this short and letting you try them. So
let's take a look at this screen here. So this is a 16-second shot.
Yes.
And essentially, it's the default profile you've got, but I see that you've greatly increased the flow rate.
Yes.
And you also, you've got a little bit of a decreasing temperature profile in there too.
Yeah. So for the reason we're using such small doses, in going below 12 grams in some of the baskets, I found that temperature had a significant impact due to the puck depth. And I think that the higher temperature on a 15-gram basket, when I went down to a 12, for example, really affected the sort of harshness and almost produced an uncomfortable shot. Okay. So that was a good insight into, you know, the dose you have and how it affects temperature. But the body was definitely significant in terms of comparing it to the 15-gram basket.
So on this, I mean, there's no crema, so the crema is not fooling me.
No.
Body, but it does have a kind of, it's got a lot of body to it.
Yes.
So is this kind of a conservative basket? Like this is not an extreme one?
I would say this is more of the clarity side, and is kind of, because of the 15-gram dose, I would say it's intermediate in terms of puck prep. Like the puck depth that you have or start with will give you a head start. So if it is deeper, it will be much less chance of channeling and less will be required from your actual prep itself. But what we found with this one, with the 14-gram basket, due to its shape, the shape of the basket actually improves the puck integrity of the lower dose. So that doesn't matter so much with those type of baskets. And that's what we've generally seen with these narrower tapered edges, is that it increases puck integrity, and with the shorter ratio you can still get that clarity to pop out.
Okay, I mean, flavor-wise, what I'm getting in this, and hopefully we'll be able to compare it, this for me is like a single origin dark chocolate. Okay, and I don't mean there's any burn notes. There aren't any burn notes in it, but a single origin has got a lot of tang to it.
Yes.
A single origin chocolate is what I'm talking about. So there is absolutely acidity. There's pretty bright fruit in it.
Yes.
There is very noticeable both middle and darker chocolates in there, but it's really balanced.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to drink.
yes, that's very true.
It's just a few sips, and let's see, this was 14 in and 15 out?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a 1-to-1 shot is what you've done. Part of what I had tasked Paul with is that our 7-gram and 10-gram baskets, they don't work very well, just to be blunt. They're based on the older idea that the baskets should get smaller and smaller, less tall and less tall, but they're the same diameter. And the basic problem we encounter is that below under 15 grams, that the puck is now so thick that it tends to channel. And the only time we ever had luck with those small 7-gram baskets, for example, was if we tamped it right in the center and did lower pressure. So I wanted to know, was there a way to make single shots with the decents? Because I'm always making doubles. I'm drinking doubles. It's a lot of caffeine. But in the Italian tradition, which a lot of people subscribe to, they have several espressos during the day. And the espressos are significantly smaller, right? A 7 or even 10-gram dose is not unusual. So this is 14 in, 15 out. It's just 4 sips.
Yeah, and the way it's designed to have thicker body, that aftertaste should last with you for like, an hour or so.
Yeah, the TDS is not through the roof either. This is not an espresso that is like a super concentrated ristretto. If you told me that this was just a split double, I'd believe you because it tastes balanced.
Yes. Even if you have a slightly lighter roasted bean, because it is lighter, you can get away with a slightly slower flow rate and extend your pre-infusion longer. And what you'll find is that acidity gets tamed a little bit more and is sort of more in line with the style of an Italian espresso. So that was also an interesting note that I also saw in that, what I mean by the flexibility of this basket doesn't have to be full on dark. You can go a little bit lighter and just play around with the flow rate to make a more balanced cup.
I'm going to pull out the interface because I want to show people what Paul did. So here's the profile, okay, that he's got. He's got an 8 milliliter per second flow rate, and he also has a temperature that starts at, looks like 84, and then goes down to 78. So let me show you how one would do that. Here it is here, but we're going to go back and we're just going to pull in the default profile there. Okay. Now there's 2 things you need to change. Here is the flow rate, and if I drag that up to max, now I've got a faster start. And then if I tap here, I can change the temperature. Did we say 82 was the start?
Yep, 82.
Okay. And if I tap on the thermometer, I get different steps here. And so I can tap here, and you start at 82 and you went to
80 on the pre-infusion and hold.
Okay, so 82 to start.
Yep.
And then 80 there, and then down to
also 80 on the hold, and then 72 on the decline.
Great. 72. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. We can do these big temperature changes.
It's pretty bad.
So there we go. There's the temperature changes, and that's essentially how you program a shot. If you are wondering, what's this interface for? It seems kind of simplistic. In fact, on forums, you might have heard, oh, no one uses this interface anymore. Everyone uses the advanced interface. Well, 3-stage espressos with pre-infusion, a rise, and a hold, and then a decline is very, very common. That is, and it makes great coffee. There are, of course, more complicated espressos out there. The downside to them is if you want to play with the program, you better know what you're doing. Whereas this straightforward interface with 1, 2, and 3 stages and sliders, you can change a few things. Here we change temperature profiling and the pre-infusion, and we've got a radically different shot. Do you think that the technique you're discovering here really needs the lighter temperature? Did you try these with the default 92 Celsius, 10 Celsius hotter?
I did, but that was with a longer ratio, not the 1-to-1. I suspect that if I did have more time with the 1-to-1s, because in all fairness, I was just, we've been drinking this bean for a long time, and flavors just popped out that I just never tasted before. So
these beans are often, I would say, perfectly nice.
Yes, yeah.
They're perfectly nice, and this is now exceptional. And I'd say this is one of the best espressos I've had, just plain Italian style. This is delicious, and there's a couple things going on. There's the basket, the temperature, which are both weird and not anything I've experience with. So I would say probably if we do sell these baskets, we need to have some different profiles that are optimized for them, so that you guys don't have to dig into Paul's brain. Are we ready for another shot?
Yeah, of course. So let's try out some of the baskets. So we will go from bigger to small. So let's try out the 14-gram baskets. So this will be basket number 1. I did dial these in before. So basket number 1, the grind setting should be around 8.3. So I'm just going to adjust that right now on the niche. And there we are. And what's nice about these baskets, not out of design or intention, is that the grind settings seem to align without too much adjustment, which is quite nice when you're switching between baskets a lot. I find it a little bit of a frustration, well, not really a frustration, but kind of an annoyance that I have to find my grind again with a certain basket. That is until you're more familiar with the basket and the recipe that you're using, but it's always nice to have something that works straight away and there's not too much adjustment. And you'll find with these 2 baskets, the 14-gram baskets, that the grind setting is very, very similar, but they actually produce very different tastes. And that is contributed more to the basket shape and how the coffee is emulsifying and extracting inside the basket. So essentially the dose, the recipe, and the profile are all the same, but it is just the basket that we are really sort of changing and making the variable here. So as normal, we're going to just go a nice WDT and make sure we've got a nice bed for extraction. And another little cool thing was that the decent tamper also fits very nicely. In some of the baskets we were testing out, the decent tamper head essentially was a little bit too big as it reached the taper, and we weren't really able to get a good seal on our coffee. So what did that mean for us is that some of the shots were pretty good, but then you would find very big inconsistencies as some shots really channeled. Okay.
I'm going to go in with our new camera and we're going to watch this shot.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So here we go.
Ooh, that's nice and thick. This is going to be also a 1-to-1 ratio?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't see any channeling. These shots are really clean.
Yeah. And you will find with these baskets, that's a very similar trait with these tapered edges in that it really increases the puck integrity. And not much change to the grind, right? So I didn't even move it 1 notch. We were, same dose, but the whole size was difference. And you can kind of see how it is sticking to the edges as you spin. You know how wine people assess body in their wine. They will swirl and see how much it clings to the edge of the cup. And in taste, how would you describe body? The best way to train your palate for body would be to have some milk, some water, taste the milk and use your tongue to rub the top of your mouth. And you'll find that with milk, it's a bit slippery. With water, you'll find that your tongue will stick to the top of your palate. So that is your, water is 0 for body and milk is 10 for body.
So walk me through how this basket is different than the previous one.
So as I mentioned, the tapered edge creates a smaller area size.
So this is, and do you know the diameter size difference between the 2?
Yep, so it will be 43 or 44 from the top of my head. It's roughly those numbers for the whole area size. And the actual diameter is around 52, 53.
And the previous one?
And the previous one, which is our standard 15-gram basket, actually I can't remember off the top of my head for this one.
Yeah, probably around 54.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's quite different.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, it has less body for me.
I'd probably agree so. I'm just looking at the flow rate right now, and as I was testing, I was getting the flow rate. If I could just bring the screen up, we can kind of see. So my flow rate, as it dipped down, came out at around 0.8, maybe 0.9. And as I was dialing in, I was aiming for around 0.6 to half as it was coming out. So it really did drip at the start, rather than it almost coming together as one coffee stream.
Could that be because we just changed the grind and we should pull the shot again?
We could do. I'm not sure if I purged the grinder, which I don't think I did.
Okay.
So it could just be retained grounds in there. Oh, here we go.
Take that away. Let's go ahead and do that, because otherwise I feel like we're not doing that basket justice. It certainly look nice and thick.
Yeah, the slower flow rate that I'm aiming for, around 0.5, 0.6, is it even looks thicker when it comes out, and it has that sort of gloofiness that everyone's very used to seeing with the sort of old school extractions being very slow.
Right. I'm going to head over here with my other camera, and we're going to see if the shot looks different this time. Okay, slight side extraction on that. I'd say it's coming out the side, but it's still nice and thick. What is the flow rate doing on that?
So actually I've probably improved by 0.1. So maybe a marked improvement, but we shall see. Okay.
All right, so the main difference there was it was just the second shot with the same grind setting, because we thought probably since we didn't purge, we didn't actually change the grind enough. And it does seem that that was the case, so always remember to purge. Kind of a blackstrap molasses on the nose.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more slippery.
Considerable more body.
Yes.
More acidity too.
Yes.
Than the first shot. So what would you be aiming for this? Why would I use this basket?
This would be, I don't know if you noticed, the aroma for me anyway was a bit more complex. I could definitely tell that there is a little bit less clarity in this shot compared to the 15 gram from the smell.
Much.
Yeah. But I do also get complexity in there, like sort of the skin of a berry. There's some sort of fruit in there, but I can't get out what it is.
Yeah, I get kind of citruses.
Yeah.
A whole variety of both pith and skin and juice.
I would say that the overall goal of this is not to compromise on the aroma compared to the 15 gram basket, but also, you know, we're obviously trying to create a balanced cup. So, for example, this one, the acidity was a little bit higher. Maybe perhaps we could have drawn it a little bit longer in terms of ratio. I think just from tasting that, I wouldn't be too disappointed if I got served that in a shop. I think the acidity is actually in line with a lot of places, but it's not offensive.
So definitely the 15 gram basket one, and I'm happy for that, was just the standout shot. I thought it was fantastic. It had great width of flavor, a lot of complexity. This, about the same mouthfeel. I actually think the 15 gram gave me some good mouthfeel there. I suspect that lower temperature is what's giving me a really nice clarity on the 15 gram medium dark roast. This is tasting more classic to me, and that's not in a bad way. There's no burnt notes, there's no defects going on. And if you told me they were different beans, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
It's definitely the same territory. I'd be in the same place in the world, different competing roasteries. But, okay, so what's next?
Okay, so this one is quite similar and will use a very similar grind setting, but is actually a little bit slower flowing. So technically,
show that basket to the camera so
Yep.
we can see what that looks like.
So I will come up to here.
Right. Yeah, maybe we'll show it on the B-roll later on.
Yeah. So this one definitely produces a much slower, slightly slower flow rate.
So this is the smallest diameter of the bunch, right?
Yes, that's
Okay, so
correct.
we should expect this to have the least clarity and the most body,
Yes.
if the theory is correct.
And this one produces great, quite full-on espresso, but I would say is best suited to a milk coffee. It just has that extra TDS that really pulls through the milk, and even though it is producing a slightly imbalanced shot, in my opinion, the milk, due to its sweetness in there, really balances it out. So that's why I really would recommend this one for a milk sort of style drink. Due to the volume we're pulling at, if you're looking at what size potentially to make this milk drink at, I would say use a cup size that is no more than 5 or 6 ounces, and you will get something very similar to what is served in an Italian cafe, which pretty much all of them, have very, very small size cups, which was...
So you come back 3 times that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And in fact, that's, a lot of people ask me, how did I drink so many espressos? And I think one of the reasons was that I was drinking a lot of one-to-ones when I was really drinking a lot of espresso. And if people are really mindful about their caffeine content, getting a really nice sort of ristretto style shot, you can drink more of them during the day as compared to a 1 to 2 or maybe even a 3 to 1 shot.
All right.
So fingers crossed, I should get a slightly slower flow rate coming out here.
So what do you see on the screen there?
So I'm seeing it at a very similar flow rate, which is almost exactly the same. So I'm going to immediately make a slightly grind change because I'm quite familiar with this basket, and I know that there are significantly better results with a more slower flow rate here.
Okay.
So
There we go with that. We've got nice crema on it though. I think the most crema of all of them actually.
yeah, I find the slower the reaction, the flow rate coming out, the bigger the crema. Okay. So let's give this a taste.
Yep, that's yours.
Okay.
Mine.
So,
I mean, on the nose, it's quite different.
yes.
It's more muted, but it's got a really pleasing roundness that's very traditional.
Okay, yeah. So I agree with you on the aroma there. The aroma was very lacking compared to the last 2 shots. But immediately when you taste, it's pretty full on, right?
It's pretty, like a huge amount of body.
Yes.
And actually really nice acidity. I would say as successful as the 15-gram one. Actually, this is
Right.
the most interesting one
Okay.
between the two. Because I am, again, getting that wide gamut of flavors with
Yes.
a couple different
Yeah.
acidities there.
Yeah. I've
It's very juicy. It's very mouth-watering.
yes. I think that's because I've pulled a lot of shots with these. It is a little bit slower. So I don't know whether the grind has changed due to the environment we're in since the last 45 minutes. But I would say that this would agree with you in that it's the better shot out of the 3. But in my own testing, when I've dialed in the other one, I found it much more pleasant to enjoy black.
Okay.
But
So
this one,
do you want to fine this up? Is that what you just did a second ago?
yeah. So I just made this a little bit more finer.
Okay, let's pull another shot.
Sure.
I know you've got several months of work here, so I'll spend more than 10 minutes of my time deciding the fate.
All right. So we're going back to the previous one.
Let's do the same one again.
Okay.
And just see if you get that slower flow rate you were looking for.
Right. Okay. So
And let's purge a little bit. Okay. I want to see if we get these to a point where Paul is recognizing them in their best. So rather than kind of the Olympic sport of fast dialing in, that we dial it in so you say, yeah, that's what I was expecting. So obviously anyone who buys a basket is going to make more than one espresso with this and try and get it to its best expression. But I was really happy with that very narrow basket. It gave me tremendous body. There was still a lot of clarity. Now, these beans are not Italian style with any char to them. So there's nothing to hide in these beans. And I think that's probably kind of important. I would be tempted to buy some Lavazza Gold or something that I know is going to have flavors that I need to hide. It'll have good stuff in it, but it's going to have some staleness or some burnt notes or something that's not great, because those are really inexpensive mass market beans, whereas these are national Barista Champion beans. One nice thing about the pumps on the Decent is you can, without looking at the screen, get a feeling for the shot. And I can tell this is a mellow shot. It's first of all, it's high pressure because the pumps are quieter at high pressure. And it was petering about at a consistent speed, right? It wasn't speeding up, slowing down.
Yes.
So a pretty successful slow shot extraction. Let's see what this looks like.
I really
like we got some tiger striping for the first time.
So this time we did reach the sort of range that I'm looking for this basket, and that's quite evident with the tiger striping on there. So this is kind of what I wanted to show you on the first shot. But no, coffee is the way it is. Sometimes you just have to repeat. But yeah, you know, even just swirling around now, it's still dropping down the crema. So this is much more thicker than the last two shots we pulled with this. And I'm interested to see what you're thinking about the flavor on this one this time around, John. So I think
a little bit more on the nose.
Yes, yeah. A little bit more on the nose, so it's got sort of more the sort of baker's cocoa on there, and a little bit of fruit.
They're both really good. I'm not going to say that there's a world of difference between them. Maybe a little bit more opened up.
Yeah, a little bit more opened up. I think this one has a little bit more sweetness. But yeah, very, very similar results. And you know, due to the flow rate difference, it's very apparent that they would be similar. So we're really picking at minute things now, but I believe that the sweetness makes it for me.
When you say sweetness here, are you saying you literally taste some characteristics like caramel, or is it reduced acidity for you?
Actually, it's more of the sweetness is now taming the acidity in there.
Because there's not really any sugar in here, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
So when you say sweetness, what do you mean here?
Yeah, so the way I assess sweetness is not necessarily the flavor of sweetness that I'm tasting, but how it is reacting with the acidity and the feel in my mouth. And sweetness to me is kind of not quite like a reaction as if you put aluminium foil in there. That's a pretty sort of acidic, sort of more acidic like reaction, but it's more sort of warming and it grows on your palate. And then the acidity dies away. So it's a little bit hard to explain. but is easier when you definitely have those caramelly sort of, description notes, and people tag onto that and associate that feeling.
So the way I think about sweetness is a bit different. I think of it as essentially fooling my brain, that when there's one flavor, there should be sugar. So in this case, I'm tasting kind of a medium caramel, not a light caramel, but a medium one, not a dark. And with a medium caramel, like, say, the sauce with sticky toffee pudding.
Oh, yeah.
That's the world I'm in. And sticky toffee has a sauce that's quite sweet caramel. And that's exactly what I'm tasting here. So for me, it's like, oh, that's sweet because it has a flavor profile associated with sweet things. It also has an acidity that's not out of control, but there is some acidity.
Yes.
I don't think there's actually less acidity than before, but this tastes sweeter to me because of the presence of that medium-bodied caramel.
Right, I see. Yes.
That's me. That is the evil world of coffee, that we have not standardized what these words mean, which is why I was asking you.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people say of a light roasted coffee, that's really sweet, and it's not. It just didn't have much acidity to it.
Right, yes.
And because there's no caramel, there's nothing in that is in the world of sweet, and so it can also mean that. So, well, that's delightful. Let's go back to the one that you were disappointed in.
Okay, yes.
And see if your newfound grind setting.
Sure. Okay.
And this one, if I remember correctly, is middle of the road in basket width between the two.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you've got a 15, a mid-range, and an extreme.
Yeah.
Okay. How small a dose have you gone with this extreme one?
I did go all the way down to 10 grams.
Yeah.
And that's where I got the, you'll get one or two successful shots, but most of them will channel. Okay. And that's just due to the temper. But,
So the sweet spot, har, for this is where?
So it's a 12-gram basket, and I found a sweet spot with 12.7.
Okay. So you need to own a 0.1 gram scale if you're going to follow Paul's advice. Luckily, everyone watching this already owns one, so...
Okay, so this is the first one. I'm just going to check it is. Right. Okay.
I'm going to literally be a bar back and move in the back so I can be out of your way and clean up these glasses.
Thank you, John.
You do have a cup here of weighed coffee beans. I don't know if those are useful for another shot.
Yep, so that's the pre-weighed 12-gram shot. So we'll use that one after this. And so that's the 12.7 dose that I was on about for the next basket. And it doesn't have to be that accurate. You can be 0.1 up and down, and it won't really affect your extraction time too much.
Okay, I can hear that we're slower now.
Yes.
And again, we're kind of having that mellow shot.
Okay.
I know people do complain about the sound, but it's quite soft and it does tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's useful.
It kind of reminds me of, back in the old days with analog internet and the noise.
So we've got, we have, again, extreme tiger striping on this. Give that a little bit of a stir. It looks very classic.
Okay. There you go, John.
Wow, we still have crema in the cup. Okay. We're back to close to the 15 gram in terms of aroma now.
Yes. So this was one of the goals of this basket, was not to compromise on aroma, increase the body, but don't lose too much clarity.
So this is very similar to me to the 15 gram, which is to say it's fantastic. But so what would be the advantage over using this basket instead of the 15?
I would say it is mainly if you're really concerned about your prep, for one.
So you think it's going to be an easier shot to pull
For sure.
because the puck is going to be a little thicker?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. There's a little bit more body to this than the 15.
Yeah. If you're really, you prioritize aftertaste over clarity, this would be much more aligned to your taste.
By aftertaste, you mean a lingering?
Yes.
As opposed to a front kind of, oh, I get everything.
No.
The universe is explained to me all at once versus it takes time.
How can I explain it more? The aftertaste will mature and will develop over time. So it's what my old roast master used to say. It's the smoker's kind of blend where they have a more of a strong taste of flavors and more intensity. So they actually prefer those types of aftertaste that really linger around.
This is not though an espresso I feel I have to dilute. And normally when I'm making shots, they're double shots, and I have to add water, otherwise they're overpowering, and I can't really give you much flavor description on them. I think also we are winning some by using these cups that are made out of porcelain. That's coming in a future video, because these are cups we're making. And also the fact that you're brewing at a lower temperature means these are instantly drinkable at pretty much the perfect temperature.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a lot of benefit from that. If you're somebody who wants to make a shot and drink it right away, this is working pretty well for me. Yeah.
So
nice body. The acidity is really controlled. There is some. It's not boring.
Yeah.
I would say this feels like, I don't know if fine print meant it because it doesn't taste like it's at the cafes where they make it.
Yeah.
But this tastes like a third wave medium dark. Like someone who's making something they know that people want, which is something in the world of chocolate, but it's showing his craft.
Yes.
This really wide gamut of flavors, acidity, some other fruits working at it, and no defects.
Yeah. That's what I really look for in especially a very short ratio shot is, most people can pull the short ratio shots and you won't be able and have this mindset, you won't be able to taste much flavor anyway. But I found with certain cafes or certain baristas that really are on their game can really produce shots like that. But what's great about this is we're able to do that with much less prep than what they're doing in the cafe. And I think that's very apparent in that, it's flexible in that you can do it with milk and with lac. That says a lot in terms of how much flavor you're pulling out. But what's better is that now it's much more achievable because you have the tools, you have, the correct basket that will produce the style that you're looking for. So, I was generally quite impressed, and to be honest, I was a little bit frustrated for a while. I'll admit that, John.
But I think your temperature finding was the unlock for that.
Yeah.
Because these are basically 9-bar shots with a slight decline, and but they're at much lower temperature. So they're fairly traditional, but with stable temperature, declining temperature profile. For me, this is the first instance I've seen of lower temperatures and temperature decline that's just clearly doing something valuable. Usually when I taste people playing with temperature profiles, it's hard to really say that was better, that was not. So congrats. I think we are going to definitely start selling those 2 baskets.
Oh, nice.
Thank you for the hard work.
Thank you very much for the opportunities to play around the machine, John. I've learned a lot.
I'm glad that we have, we came back and dialed them in again. All these shots are on visualizer.coffee, and we're going to show you on screen how to see that. And we'll put that on B-roll. Are there any questions?
Yes, there's a whole discussion going on.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up and then I'll answer the questions. So, thank you for watching this live tasting of several months of Paul's work of baskets with narrower bodies, which we think we've solved the main issues with body. We think we can really deliver great clarity and good body, which I didn't know we could do. So it's a good day. Thank you, Paul.
No problem. Thank you very much, John.
All right.
Okay, so Emil
Yeah,
and
come over.
Ranked One had the thing going on. There's a lot of back and forth, but Emil first said, I just came up from a Brivial 54 machine and immediately noticed more body with a decent 64 flat burr. I realized I like body. Great topic.
Okay, thank you.
Google reviewer said it's a decent, a huge step up from dual boiler. I'm into dark roast mainly, by the way.
Okay, so the question is the dual boiler, I assume he means the Breville dual boiler, a big step up from, is it a big step up to go from the dual boiler from Breville up to the decent? Well, first of all, it is a big step up in price. We're a lot more expensive, and we would not be making this video if we didn't deliver something for that extra money. So in no way am I gonna badmouth the Breville dual boiler, because at its price, it is amazing. And I think it's a great machine. Frankly, it's the best beginner machine you can get in that sort of $1,000, $1,500 price range. So start with that. And if you find that you want more flexibility, you want to explore more coffees, you want to bump up your game even further, yeah, I mean, at this point, you can Google YouTube and you'll see that the vast majority of people who are deeply in the coffee are making videos with the decent, and there's a reason for that, because we've made something that costs a lot, is innovative, and people are buying. So I don't want to say anything more than that, because we are the manufacturer and we're trying to sell you something. So I did make a video comparing the Breville lever machines and the decent, and if you search on YouTube for that, I'll go into some detail as to what Breville's profiles look like, why I think they're good, why I think they're better than 9-bar machines from other companies, and what I think you get from the decent.
Emil says, honestly, I like a little body, but clarity is important, so I don't need monster body.
I think I was pretty shocked that you did not want to sacrifice clarity.
Yeah.
Because when you made a shot for me, God, I don't know, like a year ago, and they were super consistent. Like they were just lever shots that were just pure middle-of-the-road chocolate, never any acidity, and I could see a cafe doing really well with it, but we were both going, man, this is super boring.
Yeah, and I think it was me finding my feet on the D1 and obviously trying out what other people are trying, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, and it was only really until you gave me this project that I was like, okay, let's get into this thing and see what we can do. And I honestly didn't know whether I was going to make it at the end of it.
It took a long time, and there were pages and pages of notes, and Paul was doing these SCA clarity ratings and such. I was like, oh, okay, he's gone full into this.
Yeah, I was testing so many baskets, and I was like, I'm not going to remember all this, so I had to, structure it in a way that, I could project it as results to you and give you feedback at the same time, but also for me to understand what was going on. But yeah, it's for me, I'm very flavor driven, and obviously it's antagonistic characteristics, but has anyone tried to get clarity and find middle ground with body? So I took it on, and luckily it came out with something fairly good. And
so you did try some baskets. This is a question no one's asked yet, but I'm going to ask it. You did try some baskets that had like tiny diameters for really small doses, and we're not trying any of those here. Now those were for really low doses, like 7 or 8 grams. So what was wrong with those? Why aren't we tasting that now?
Because I just felt like it didn't improve on what was already around. And while it did solve the problem of over certain aspects over technique and recipe and temperature and all that other variables, it didn't really add anything on to me to really pursue that basket and really recommend it. I think that there are, you'd find much more success with a 15-gram basket and lower dosing that, and possibly getting less channeling as compared to a smaller whole basket with such a low depth. But as I'm flavor driven, it was just it didn't excite me as much, and they were generally quite low acidity, and overall it's just not the style I was looking for. So it didn't really add anything. I just thought didn't really improve anything in the forms of technique, and it wasn't really my style. So that's kind of why I didn't pursue along that route.
So you just didn't want to compromise on the quality of the drink.
Yeah.
So we could go down to maybe a 7-gram basket, but it'd be a boring espresso.
Exactly.
And we're not called boring espresso. We're close to it, but we're not boring espresso.
And we've got this beautiful machine and all these things we can play around with. I just didn't want to produce something that was just kind of not really improving on anything.
So instead of doing, let's say, a 7 gram in, 14 out, you're doing a 12.6 in, 14 out, is that right?
Yes, 14 out,
Okay.
15 out, yeah.
And so the minimum dose essentially you're recommending to make outstanding espresso is 12.6 grams.
Yeah.
So that's how it is, folks. Can't make fantastic espresso lower than that, but it doesn't mean you have to drink 28 gram monsters. The out cup at 14 grams is the same as that Italian 7 in, 14 out, except that it tastes better. All right, next question.
Brian's laughing at you guys, said, LOL, John and Paul didn't even know you could get the temperature of each step until you can change it until the very recently in that style of profile.
So I did add that feature. If you tap the thermometer, you can see all the steps, and it is hidden by default, and the reason is I didn't want to make it too complicated that suddenly everyone who used the 3-step espressos had to now think about temperature profiling. That being said, the standard profiles do come with temperature profiling built in. But yes, it's way easier to do a temperature profile with those 4 sliders than it is with the advanced editor.
John, you might not like this one, but I'll put you on the spot. Someone says the interface he showed is powerful, but wow, it needs a UX and visual designer to help a lot.
Well, let me ask you a question. If it had a very, very pretty interface, would you make better coffee with it? And everything is, you put time in here, you have less time here. And the reality is that this app focuses the quality of the coffee and the speed of the interface over the prettiness. It's not meant to compete with a Netflix or any of the commercial apps. It's written 100% by me, and then the plugins, the skins are written all by one person. And I don't want to change that. That's kind of a core belief in this. That's why the machine, you know, it looks nice, but it's not oh my God, that's the most beautiful machine I ever saw. The goal was to make it compact and work well at a reasonable price. You look at the machines that are incredibly gorgeous and you lose something. Either they have less functionality or they're more expensive or both. So sorry, we're not aiming to make an app that's amazing to look at. Now, that being said, every 6 months, basically, there's a new app version that comes out, and I'd say there's about 10 to 20 UI designers on there that have made various proposals. I will 100% admit that the temperature profiling feature right there is not pretty, and I haven't gone back to revise that at all. That I would like to. Those 4 sliders, it's not really the way to do it. I think probably they should have been rotated this way so that the orientation was the same as the shot from left to right. So guilty there, but I'm pretty happy with the usability of the 3-step shot editor. The user interface people on Diaspora have come up with alternatives. I would say that no alternative has more than 30% of people who think it's an improvement. So we got something that works, doesn't crash, it makes coffee. Let's focus on things that actually improve our life.
All right, I won't keep you guys for too long. Someone says no espresso is sweet. When you guys talk about sweetness, no espresso is sweet as in sweet like honey or sugar.
So the point is no espresso is sweet like honey or sugar. I think we totally covered that as to what sweetness is for Paul and myself, so I'm not going to rehash that.
The same person says, if the decent can give me a Cafe Nero coffee flavor, I'm sold. I don't know what Cafe Nero is.
Oh God. So I mean, Cafe Nero. Cafe Nero is a chain that competes with Starbucks in London, actually all of England. Yeah, I would say that's not a very hard espresso. I mean, first, don't buy expensive beans. Make sure they have a slight rancidity to them. And some nice burn notes. Sorry, I'm being condescending. I shouldn't be. I don't think much of Cafe Nero. I'm sorry. I actually think Starbucks has some coffees that are better. I think Cafe Nero is a place that's lovely to sit down in.
I have to admit, probably Cafe Nero is probably one of the first cafes I sat in and probably had my first experience.
That wasn't a good one.
No. No, it wasn't.
I will say that if you are in London, go take a look at the Caffè Nero poster, because there are 4 baristas there on the photograph, and one of them is the spitting image of Mohammed here. I'm going to show it to him. But every time I walk by and I go, I thought you worked for me. You're moonlighting for Caffè Nero. I don't think making a Caffè Nero, I actually think you could make a Caffè Nero style espresso on pretty much any 2,000 pound or more expensive machine.
Okay, just let people know that they can see the specs for the baskets when you guys are tasting the shot, because they're asking when we have the list of the baskets used, and they did show on the screen when you guys are tasting.
So let's just go through them right here.
Sure.
Let's show, so the first shot we did, Paul,
Hold on.
it's going to come up now.
1 second. This is the first shot.
Yeah. So the first shot was a
This is it.
benchmark shot. So this was with the standard 15-gram precision basket, and we used 14.7, and the grind setting I believe was 7.5 from the top of my head.
7.4.
7.4. Okay, got to remember the point one.
Shot
And
number 2.
shot number 2 was also the same dose, same recipe, but the grind setting was at 8.3. Yep. This is testing me now.
So more importantly, I would say go look at visualizer.coffee and search for Decent John, because what you want to nail is the flow rate.
Yes. So in all the shots, they were both all for 14.7 grams, and all the ratios were 1:1. So we extracted to 15 grams, and the temperature was also the same. So you want to aim for your flow rate when it bottoms out to be around 0.5 to 0.7, and not anything above there. Otherwise, you won't be hitting the range for that. But
Shot number 3.
shot number 3, which was the repeat of the last shot, but the flow rate was made much more slower, and we found that the shot was much more interesting and a little bit sweeter. And then for the last shot was the same setting, the one we just tuned prior, and was using the first number 1 basket, and also produced a flow rate which bottomed out at around 0.7.
So definitely the slower flow rates on these narrower baskets. And I'm going to pull them out here so you can see. Let's see, put them on my head. I'm a good contrast. So that is our 15-gram basket. And then that is the intermediate one, I believe.
Yep.
And then this one here is the most extreme. And I don't know yet what we're going to call them, but when we post about it, we'll say the compromise intermediate one and the extreme one. Will make that clear which that is. Any more questions?
Someone's asking for recommendation regarding puck screen, reducing the gap, better for reducing channeling, cleaning the puck screen with coffee. It's a lot of puck
No, that's good. So puck screen is actually very much on topic. So earlier on, I talked about how the head space, that's to say the amount of space from the puck to the top, is super important. And it's important because the puck expands when you put water in. If you have a fair amount of headspace, there's 2 things you could do. One, which I've already discussed, is you can lower the shower screen into it, which you can do with a kit. Another thing you could do instead is just put like a 2 or 3 millimeter thick, sorry, I just blanked on what they're called.
Spaces?
Screens.
Puck screens, yeah.
Puck screen. We can put a 2 or 3 millimeter puck screen on there, and then that will essentially remove 2 or 3 millimeters of headspace, and will also cause your shot to be thicker. So that's actually a really nice lazy way. If you want clarity most of the time, and then you want to quickly have less headspace, you just drop 1 or 2 of those things in there. In terms of cleaning, we have talked about this before, oils will get caught in those things. Those things are essentially a metal mesh, and they're very hard to clean. The main way to clean them, which actually works, is a high temperature oven. So what I recommend is you have 10 or 20 of these things, and once a day go through and use a clean one. And then once you've accumulated a lot of them, essentially you want to incinerate that coffee. The other thing you can do is tongs over a gas burner. That will also remove it. We here have found with a ultrasonic bath and Cafiza for, I don't know, 24 hours,
Yeah.
there's still a rank smell coming out of it.
That's right.
So you got to burn it.
Yep, there's a lot of little craters in there where all the coffees kind of get trapped, and even if you smell it and have a look at it, you still can't see it, but rest assured there are still stuff in there, so burning or putting it in the oven is the best way to go.
All right.
All right, you guys can wrap up now.
All right. Thanks very much for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.